we as in-house procurement professionals and in-house leaders, we should pay more closer attention to what our internal people say, do, and what level of expertise they bring. Because when they become outsiders, we're going to pay them more money, and we're going to listen to them then. But I am a believer that every time when we go to the meeting, it's unknown. So our adrenaline goes up, cortisol shoots up. But then at the end of the meeting, the decision is made, dopamine shots up, and you have the same cortisol dopamine yo-yo. And the next meeting, and that happens 10 times a day. And when you're out of the environment, you don't have this chemical reaction, and that actually messes up with your brain.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Proc and Roll, your guide to practical procurement. Today, we have a very special episode for you. It isn't very often that Natasha and I sit down and just ponder the past, where we are, why we are where we are, and where we've come from. I don't spend too much time bragging about Natasha, and frankly, she's not the kind of person that would brag much about herself. But let me just give you some idea about where she's been. Right, she was Nike's first CPO. Is that right, Natasha?
Yep.
Okay. First CPO, grew spend under management from 10 billion to 15 billion, quadrupled savings in 3 years, 23x ROI on procurement versus the industry standard of about 10%, right? So that's a really massive ROI. A very significant business diversity program, in interacting with the board. Over her career, over 17 billion of cumulative savings. Salesforce, we've talked about, of course, Nike, Salesforce, IBM, McKesson. I looked through her LinkedIn again this morning. She has been around the block. She's been in some of the best companies on the planet and done some really amazing things. And of course, now she's taken this to Candor Procurement, where she works with other incredible businesses to bring the learnings of all of that, back to the leadership, and is doing some really cool things there. So I thought it would be, because Zach's in London, and I think the heat has got him down and out. He keeps complaining about it every week we do the recording, and he can barely stand it because he doesn't have an air conditioner. Sorry, Zach, we'll send you an air conditioner, and hopefully the cool winds from the northern Atlantic will blow through and cool down London one of these days. But we don't have the chance to just sit down very much and kind of ponder this path and sort of what motivated your departure from procurement into Candor. My journey was, we don't have a exactly parallel path, but we both find ourselves out of the enterprise procurement leadership space now in the startup founder space. And I thought it'd be really helpful. I know a lot of people I talk to want to kind of consider building their own thing. And by the way, I'm not sure that's the best answer. It's for sure not the best answer for everybody. But looking back at procurement from where we are, I think opens up a really interesting aperture for this conversation. So Natasha, I think we'll just get going. I know you have questions for me and this things and observations that you've seen that contribute to this idea. But what did you believe, like when you were going through those procurement leadership roles? What did you understand, kind of your perspective, that now that you're in Candor and sort of looking at procurement from a different angle was wrong or just misunderstood from that perspective? Like what has really maybe been your biggest learning looking at procurement from this other dimension?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the kind words. And I appreciate you recognizing my my career and achievements. And I am procurement fan. Like, I remember when I was maybe like 10 years in, I tried to change the field, and I wanted to go into M&A and strategy. And that didn't work out. So I'm glad I stayed with procurement, because now I've been in this field for 27 years. And I actually think that procurement is now becoming more and more procurement skills and vision and ability to solve multiple problems that we've never faced before is becoming more in demand than ever. You ask me what I believe that happened to be not true. And obviously when you're in business for 27 years, and if you never changed your perspectives on anything that you hadn't grown, then you just basically, the same individual without much learning in 27 years. One of the greatest misconceptions that I was introduced to in the beginning of my career is that suppliers are eating our lunch. And I grew up on phrases like sharpen your pencil, give me a best price, throat to choke, threatening to take the business away from the suppliers. And that's how I was brought into procurement, and just squeeze suppliers on the margins. Like everything that right now sounds so to me. But that was my initial introduction to procurement. So that probably is the first misconception, that suppliers actually are the greatest partners to procurement professionals. Partnership, first and foremost, just as it is in real life, is about communication and is about sharing what's important to you. And I've learned that if I share with suppliers what I'm trying to solve versus pushing them to the result I expect, that they actually helping me not just to deliver the result, but maybe solve it in a different and better way. So I'd say that probably one of the big kind of relationship aspects that I've changed. And of course, my perspective on leadership had changed completely, because when I arrived to procurement world 27 years ago, I was a strong believer in managing by providing very clear directions, instructions, being very prescriptive and clear. You do this, you do this, you do this. And of course, that has nothing to do with leadership.
There's a pretty strong parallel between those two, right? One is, even on the supplier side, when you're sharpening your pencil, you're kind of forcing them down the path of your perspective. Same thing with people that you're describing. It's interesting; those two are so similar. What you're describing in terms of the kind of suppliers and their motivation, and whether you can trust them, and how you approach all of these. Of course, when I started, I was at Intel, and these big companies, as you've been in as well, are. I remember thinking how incredible it would be to be a supplier to Intel, just because it's this giant machine, successful machine. I mean, they've had some struggles lately, of course, versus their heyday kind of in the 90s and early 2000 or something. I don't know, but okay, so this supplier now is they're here because they want to get the money from the company, and they're going to take advantage of the situation. And honestly, I think there's some degree of truth to that, the idea of, like, why are the suppliers here? They are showing up for economic reasons, right? They're showing up to make money. Of course, that's what drives everything. But the invisible hand that says people are going to act in their own self-interest, the suppliers are going to act in their own self-interest. But if you leave it there and you assume that's bad for me as a buyer, that they're acting in their own self-interest, it's probably wrong. I mean, I'm acting in my own self-interest too. And I think the key is to figure out how to align our interests towards successful outcomes that benefit both organizations. And that kind of starts sounding weirdly like this win-win that, like, we've talked about before. But I think that it's a little different than that. It's a case where there's a certain level of trust and collaboration in order to not just negotiate the win-win, but set up a partnership that's win-win. I want to push on this a little bit, because when I think about suppliers, Natasha, and I think it comes into this, there are suppliers where, I mean, you can't have that kind of a relationship with your, I don't know what Nike's number was. Let's just assume Nike had, 20 to 30,000 suppliers or some big number. It's just not practical, right? To assume a level of trust and that kind of collaboration with all those suppliers. Are there suppliers that you do treat sort of in a very transactional way versus a very collaborative partnership way? Like how do you think about that?
Well, it's inevitable. Just as you said, you have 20, 30,000 suppliers in any organization, and you cannot give equal attention to everyone. That's why you have SRM, TPRM programs. That's why you have like supplier segmentation. My point was less about kind of like how we interact with different suppliers and who we interact with, but more on the overall philosophy on, yes, suppliers do have commercial interests in mind. They're not in business for shits and giggles. It's to generate revenue, but it's more from the perspective of, are you driven by creating goodness and bringing the best intention to your clients, or are you there just to generate next sale? Because very often, in the past, I worked with companies, especially consulting companies. They're in the middle of delivery for their engagement, and you already see how their interest to the current commitment, current engagement lessons, and they're already upselling you the next thing. They're already making their recommendations or deliverables, they're tying them to potential next engagement. So that I feel a little bit kind of like playing the game on supplier side. But from the in-house perspective, it took some years to realize that suppliers are my greatest source of quick solutions, savings, institutional, like any intellectual knowledge, any market intelligence, know-how, right? And but that's just one aspect of learning.
Has that changed now that you're on the outside? I mean, my guess is that now that you're presenting yourself to these corporates as a supplier, that same, like if I understood what you said, you gained that understanding before you left as part of as you're maturing in procurement, right? But now you're on the outside and now you're acting as a vendor. And I'm assuming that it's just really strengthened that perspective. How does it feel being on the outside now? I'm sure I know by what you do and who you are, trying to elevate the value that you're delivering to the customer, trying to partner and collaborate. Like how does it feel on the outside, on the other side of that table? And is there nuance to it that, that is it really kind of surprised you as you switch sides of the table?
We procurement professionals, we in-house. We'll bring suppliers because they know something, or they can deliver something or build something that we don't know. And then as soon as they start providing their service offering, we start bending them. No, this is not our culture. No, this is not how we work. No, you need to customize this so it would fit better into our environment. So, and in-house enterprises do exactly the same to their internal hires. So what I experienced, especially that the more senior I became, the more apparent it became that I would be hired as a procurement leader, as a transformation leader, as someone who's been experienced in driving pretty significant changes in procurement organizations. But then organization that is driven by multiple priorities and multiple stakeholders, and I would have a lot of peers and I would have like multiple bosses, they would start kind of like tweaking the view of procurement transformation. No, let's not do this in the first order. Let's do it in the third order. It's kind of like, no, we cannot do it in the third order because this is a prerequisite to build the better processes, to have greater technology utilization, to have enterprise greater rate of or greater adoption rate of certain solutions. So very often being inside being an in-house procurement professional, I would experience that people who actually don't understand procurement and are not experienced in transformation, that they would be questioning, doubting, or canceling me doing exactly what they hired me to do. And what I'm observing being a supplier now to the clients is that more often than not, what we recommend, that gets implemented. What we recommend, at least it gets paid attention to. If someone is hiring candor procurement for our level of expertise or for my experience in procurement and transformation, if I provide suggestions, recommendations, or if we are asked to implement them, more often than not, our clients follow our lead. And that is one of the reasons why I left corporate world, because I felt that after being in a corporate for 25 years and accumulating all this experience, I have greater chance to help other companies, multiple companies, to improve their procurement solutions versus going back in the house to another company and just staying with and just bringing all that knowledge to one enterprise. So summarizing is that we as in-house procurement professionals and in-house leaders, we should pay more closer attention to what our internal people say, do, and what level of expertise they bring. Because when they become outsiders, we're going to pay them more money, and we're going to listen to them then. And that, I think, is the greatest benefit to me personally and to candor procurement now, that I no longer have to prove to any single enterprise that I actually earned my spot in procurement and transformation space, that the clients who hire us see it and they follow us, our recommendations. And that's rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, you're going to have to prove it anyway, right? To get the job from them in the first place, like you have to prove your credentials. But then you're there, you have some sort of, I mean, if they're willing to pay you to show up, then they trust that you're bringing the expertise that can really help them. But I would guess still though, it's probably kind of hard for, I don't know. I was.
Why did you leave corporate?
I got an infection called, an idea that I couldn't cultivate. I had to carry this idea and create something that I couldn't do where I was. I tried really hard, Natasha. Like my goal after I met with, you and others at the Bay Area Procurement Council was to build Graphite as a cooperative technology between companies, sitting in my seat at Adobe, because then I can have my lunch and eat it too, right? Great company, all these great benefits, very limited risk. It would be way easier to build it underneath the brand of Adobe and these other companies than create a brand new brand of Graphite and educate people what it is and everything else. But the idea just got a hold of me. I never wanted to have a side hustle. I just wanted to climb the corporate ladder and, be successful and add value. And at a certain point, I think what took over my career was a desire to make procurement work better. Just like I've got to keep making things better and better and better. And then there's this realization that the only way I could do that now is more like kind of like you're saying. I mean, we're approaching the same concept from a different place, because you're saying I can help more companies, and I'm looking at the problem saying the problem can be better solved by doing it across companies instead of inside of a company. But it's really a similar thing. I mean, that was ultimately what did it. But believe me, I mean, I've questioned the intelligence of leaving the enterprise corporate world behind many times along this journey, because, like you, I loved building amazing teams and working together on vision and transformation. It was really great. In fact, I text and have relationships, as I know you do, with people from these various teams of kind of in the enterprise space. I really treasure those times. But I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's just part of life. Is this weird combination of planning. Like this is what I want my life to turn out like. This is what I want, what this thing's going to turn into, and opportunities. And I've always believed from my very first job. In fact, I remember a really good friend of mine named Paul Cassidy. He and I started at a similar time at Intel. And I don't know if he'd agree with this or not. I think we've talked about it, but it seemed like he kind of got sideways with the director. And my observation of that, well, I mean, we would ride bikes on the weekends and talk, like our brains were just like in sync so much. But he would push on ideas when they weren't. He didn't read the room quite well enough to see that the room's not ready for this idea, and he would push on it, and then it would kind of put him out of favor with the people that he was talking to, the leadership in the room. And I kind of developed this idea that the enterprise is like this, a lot of these gears that are just kind of moving through time. And you can push an idea when the gears aren't lined up until you start bleeding all over the wall. Like you can't run through the brick wall, but there's this certain moment when the gears just line up and open up for you, and then you can move an idea forward. And that was in the concept of procurement and transformation. But like from a career perspective, I think it's kind of the same. It's been the same for me, where I haven't tried to force my career forward. I've just tried to see when the gears are coming up, what's that opportunity that's presenting, and then go through with it. And yeah, so that's anyway, that doesn't have a lot to do with procurement generally or, suppliers. I think you can take the principle and apply it anywhere. But yeah, I follow the opportunities, and sometimes that I was going to say, sometimes that leads to sort of an easier path and sometimes a harder path. But in my experience, it hasn't really ever led to an easier path. Like the opportunities to move forward have almost always increased the stress and challenge, and the stakes of the game I'm playing. It's almost like a video game where you kind of go, oh, that's how I'm leveling up to the next level now. And then all of a sudden the monsters and the demons, I don't play video games, so I'm just making stuff up. Like they're bigger and they're badder and they're harder. And now I have an opportunity to grow more.
Yeah. And I think that how we choose our next professional steps change with time and with where we are in our professional career. It's kind of like early on, those of us who have professional ambitions, we're trying to learn as much as possible. We're raising our hand as frequently as possible. We are stepping into areas regardless if they're ours or not. And convenient or not, we just creating, just kind of like slurping in and absorbing as many new projects and areas where we can contribute. And then later on, when we have kind of like significant experience, we start realizing that it's time to get rewarded for this. So this is when we focus more on the money, the title, career progression, who we're going to report to. And then there's the next phase when you feel yourself very comfortable and confident as a professional, and you want to kind of like grow your impact on the organization. And you're looking for the roles that would be a little bit more stretchy, like when you know 60% of the job and 40 will be a stretch. And then usually, like when you go through all the stages, you're closer to 50. And your kids may already be kind of like pre-college or college or post-college age, depending when you had children. And then you start getting a bug because you had a bug of, you had an idea. And it's not that you got entrepreneurial bug. You got a bug specifically that you kept observing how suppliers get onboarded. And you're like, it's not possible that in 21st century, you're following such an obsolete, redundant, cumbersome, user-unfriendly process, and there's no solution to do it better. So you were infected with the idea to create better solution. I was not infected with an idea of better solution. I did not have entrepreneurial bug in me at all. I just became utterly disenchanted with the large corporate structures. And I just could not figure out what else to do with the experience I have, and not wanting to go back to large enterprise. But I was infected, and this is where I'm like, this are different career progressions. Like I was infected with a desire that I am at the level of professional knowledge, and I'm at the point of my career when it's way more important for me to share the knowledge than to accumulate the knowledge. Little did I know at that time that AI will put me in a position when I would have to accumulate a lot of new knowledge and open up my brain to all technological development that I will have to learn. So the learning, like I'll be 57 in a couple of months, so learning is not stopping, and now actually is even more than before. But that desire, it was not even like a desire, it was kind of like just a pushing necessity that otherwise, like I just couldn't find a different way to apply myself other than opening Candor Procurement, where we can help multiple companies to solve procurement problems. Because
I got to ask though, Natasha, sorry to interrupt you. You've been outside of the enterprise. I mean, you kind of, I know you're not trying to demonize enterprise structure and organization and all that big stuff. I mean, you're still part of it, just kind of from the outside instead of the inside. I'm curious about, let's just say that somebody like snapped their fingers and you took what you've learned since you left back into the procurement leadership role. So like getting really practical here for others, but how would you act differently as a CPO tomorrow? Well, gosh, you're in an acting CPO role now, I think, with one of your clients. So you're still kind of in that space, but what have you really learned? Like, what have been the big nuggets being outside? Because I know, I'll just comment about me. Like I would say, you mentioned learning. I think part of the disenchantment I was feeling that kind of went in parallel with my exit from the enterprise into this was a belief that I wasn't I just wasn't progressing like I had been. These earlier phases that you're talking about in your career and your life, I think the learning curve is so steep that the fulfillment that we get from learning and growing, which is super important to us as humans, right? I think if you turn off learning and growth out of a human, I think that you're just turning on the death trap for them. And I kind of felt that kind of coming into me, like I wasn't having that. And since I've left Adobe and started Graphite, like I feel like I'm 20 years old again and I don't know anything and I'm learning everything like brand new almost. And so I can think of a number of things that I would do differently and how I would feel different and how I would lead different. I'm curious what have been how would you go back? How do you live differently now that you've lived on this build your business side and had these new learnings? What have been the big learnings that would change your perspective and how you operate with the machine?
I would be very, very clear with the enterprise and with enterprise leaders. What do you want from procurement? Like, what do you want your procurement to be? Do you want it to be a cash machine? Do you want it to be a risk prevention machine? Do you want it to be kind of like in the center of your compliance? Like, different organizations have different priorities. I realized, for example, that at the time when I was hired at Nike, and I think I shared it in one of the previous episodes, out of 9 people who interviewed me, 8 asked me about my experience in building business diversity and inclusion programs. So, and because Nike made a public pledge of becoming a member of $1 billion club, maybe like a year before I joined the company, that actually was the main priority. And even though we quadrupled the savings in 3 years, and even though we improved technology solutions, processes, we generated the bulletproof supplier relationship management program, we brought a lot of simplicity into processes and built excellent relationships with key stakeholders. That actually was not that organization was very much focusing on. It's just at that time they needed that program. And once the program delivered $1 billion, the program got shut down. So, and I would say that for any procurement professional stepping in the role of a CPO, just be very, very clear what is procurement to the enterprise. And then decide for yourself if this is something that will excite you driving the changes. Like one of the clients that Kendra Procurement has, and where I'm stepping in the role of the interim CPO, is that they are just conceptualizing what does it mean to do procurement transformation. And they have the whole 2-3 year journey ahead of them. But the enterprise is very, very clear. We want to turn procurement from the cost center into profit generator. Please, Kendra Procurement, help us to build a roadmap how to get there. And that's an exciting challenge for me, and it certainly will be super exciting for whoever will decide to take this job as a permanent CPO.
So let me see if I can distill that down a little bit. It sounds like maybe one of the big learnings that you've walked away with is the absolute imperative to understand from the highest level that you can what the priority and alignment is to the business success of the company, of the organization. I think, well, I know you well enough to know that this is another one of your learnings that didn't just show up when you left Nike. I know you were already working on some, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say I know. I believe you were already kind of in that mindset. And I'd say the last maybe 10 years of my career in enterprise, I had the same kind of understanding. Let me try this on in terms of my learning and see what you think about this. I think, me personally, I would achieve that better now than I did then, because I am more fearless now than I was then. And I think part of that fearlessness has come from being in this world of startup land. Almost every day feels like I have to run through fires that could absolutely torch and destroy me. It's not that dramatic, but the kind of the challenges, that I have to face on a regular basis, the level of senior leadership that I'm talking to at companies on a regular basis, all of these things that have kind of been maybe doubts and fears and concerns for me in the past, I've had to just ignore or embrace or fake it till I make it or call it whatever you want. But so in those days, I would have been kind of hesitant, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I would have been kind of hesitant to go and really engage at the C-suite level at these large enterprises. These are very senior, and I don't think they're gods. Like they're not, I think in those days of early in my career, they felt like these amazing, like leaders that were untouchable almost, right? Now looking from where I'm at, like these are just humans and they're all making stupid decisions every day like the rest of us. Some smarter than others, but I would go talk to them and I would build relationships at a higher level with more confidence than, and it's not because I have FU money or anything like that, but I think there's something in that kind of that last part of your career that you talked about where you have a confidence that okay, whatever. If you want to, if our relationship doesn't work here anymore, and you're going to fire me or something's going to happen, that's fine. I'll go get another job or I'll do something else. But it's like this confidence and trueness to myself, and belief that that understanding and achieving and adding value, that conversation, I can drive it and I can deliver it, and I'm not going to be afraid. I'm gonna drive it fearlessly.
Yeah, but Conrad, I think something psychological happens when we, the parents, no longer have to pay tuition. It kind of like,
what do you mean by that? Don't have to pay tuition?
Like when our kids grow up, so you're talking about the confidence with which we can engage with the C-suite, right? So you're responding to my point that be clear with the enterprise what they expect from procurement. And you're talking about the conversations that you're hesitant to have with the C-suite that you would have greater confidence to have now. I think a couple of factors contribute to that confidence. One is how many years you've been in business. And it's not just the years of working, it's the exposure, because what years buy you, especially if you move from different companies or in the same company from different jobs, it's the exposure to various situations that do not look alike and where you constantly have to figure out solutions to the problems you hadn't faced before. So that experience gives you confidence. And when your commercial responsibilities, when you're becoming a little bit more financially less dependent on the hook that I am as an individual responsible for the mortgage, for my aging parents, for some regular bills and for tuition. So I just combined personal and professional in one, because I believe and agree that it's not the bravery, it's the ease. And this ease of engaging into conversation, whether it's the C-suite before you or whether it's the manager level person, think that ease is coming from experience, from confidence, from certain achievements when you know that majority of the challenges in your field you can address.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons.
I like your rewording that as ease, because I do think I wouldn't go back into those conversations, with my MMA gloves on, ready to have a fight, right? I think, and even like intensity and like all this like energy, I think it is coming in with more calm confidence to those conversations, knowing, like you said, that I can add significant value here. But I would say that I after 25 years in the enterprise, I had the experience, but when I got out of the chair to do some of these other things that were frankly just the idea. I mean, you mentioned tuition. I think the paycheck is sort of the ultimate handcuffs. The idea of how am I going to live without a paycheck? How am I going to live without benefits and stock options and all these other things that we grow accustomed to over these decades? And then, like you, I assume you kind of walk into the dark with some uncertainty. How's that going to feel? How's it going to act? How am I going to pay my bills? And yet you survive. You manage your way through it. It's not always easy, but there is a different world than the enterprise, whether it's small business or startup, whether you found and start your own business or whatever it is, but it's a perspective that I didn't understand before. But this perspective, like being in this space, has forced me to accelerate my learning and problem solving. And I got to tell you, while it would really help me in a return back, I mean, I'm a little bit older than you. I don't anticipate going back into the enterprise, back into a CPO role. I think I'll run out of years before I run out of work to do here at Graphite to go have that experience again. I would love to go try it again, by the way. I would love to get into Time Machine and test what I just described for you. Like, how would I act in the enterprise? But the learning itself has been so incredible. Like the fulfillment that comes from being back on the learning curve here. I've loved talking to you about this, Natasha. I'm curious.
But Conrad, I would not advocate for entrepreneurship. Because when someone is saying is like, oh, I have a friend and he is kind of like thinking about like what is the next career step. And I said, well, if the person is thinking about entrepreneurship, absolutely connect us. I'll talk him out of it. Because I just think that this is a very, very, very challenging journey. And on the one hand, can't complain. We always from day one had clients. And interestingly enough, we as a good stewards and disciplinary students of entrepreneurship, we put together very detailed profile called Ideal Customer Profile, ICP. And all clients we had up to this point, none of them fit into that profile. So, yeah, but
it's so fun. It's so funny you went there because where I wanted to go to wrap up this is like with a really specific question, like to CPOs and others that are considering becoming an entrepreneur. I was going to lay this out for you like that because I think it would be almost irresponsible of us to close down the podcast without kind of talking the real truth. Like like when you pull the curtains back and address what you're just saying, like it's very challenging. It's really difficult.
Yeah. And it's not because, like, for example, in services, you don't raise investment. Okay, that's fine. You actually don't need that much money from the beginning. You need like just regular expenses like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, which you can probably kind of like set aside. You can find it. It's the complete absence of any structure, because when you work in a corporate world, you enter the building in the morning, and then the train of meetings and conversations and solutions and decisions just carries you from station to station. Yes, you need to bring your alertness, you need to bring your mental agility, you need to bring your positive attitude, you need to bring your leadership skills. Like, you have to show up, but you don't have to create that structure. You know that if you know that the benefits will be offered to you. If you have an employee who needs to apply to a green card, all you need to do is call legal. If you need to organize an event, you just go, I don't know, the marketing, right? If you want to participate in a conference, you just need to reach out to corporate communication. So you know where to go when you need to do something. when you stepping out from corporate world, as I did after 25 years, and I started in the quietness of my home office, that silence was deafening. Nothing is happening. There's like, if I don't schedule the meetings, meetings don't happen. If I don't create marketing materials don't happen. If I don't find the way to create the medical benefits, they're not happening. If I don't create marketing campaign, then nobody's going to do it for me. So, and it's quiet because in the beginning, nobody's calling you, nobody's emailing you, nobody's seeking you because A, nobody cares. B, nobody knows what you're up to. But even when people know what you're up to, until you become known with a strong reputation, nobody cares. Nobody reach out. Nobody will reach out. So, and this absence of structure, this quietness, and there's one thing that maybe someone who has a degree in biochemistry will say that what I'm saying is a complete nonsense. But I am a believer that every time when we go to the meeting, it's unknown. So our adrenaline goes up, cortisol shoots up, and we kind of like operating in the unknown. We're listening. But then at the end of the meeting, 35, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, we arrive to the decision. Exhale. The decision is made. We write it down. So dopamine shots up because you have satisfaction. We discussed something, we decided. Then you move to the next meeting and you have the same cortisol, dopamine yo-yo and the next meeting. And that happens 10 times a day. And whether it's healthy or not, that's a different subject. But with you in the corporate world, this dopamine cortisol yo-yo happens constantly. And when you're out of the environment and you in a process of building, which is very slow and uneventful at first, you don't have this chemical reaction. And that actually messes up with your brain because it operates on completely different chemical platform.
Well, I'm not from a biochemistry perspective or even from an experience perspective. I don't know how to argue with that any differently. I never thought about my time in the corporate world quite like that in terms of the kind of the ups and the downs and the engagement. You know, I think if I had to say what I think is the hardest about starting a business, it's that there's these what seem like overnight sensations of success that we see in media, like Facebook just kind of pops out of nothing and all of a sudden it's one of the top companies on the planet. And there's other examples that kind of look and feel like that. Some things like NVIDIA, that's this giant company now that was on the brink of failure making sort of game processors, you know, a few decades ago. Some of these things, they just feel like overnight sensations. And I think there's very few of those. I mean, Chat GPT and some other things like that, the speed of going from nothing to everything in a small, super small handful of startups, it makes it look like that's kind of the norm. But when you go into like day-to-day of starting a business, whether it's procurement consulting services or whether it's procurement technology or anything, it's like day-to-day incredibly hard work to get that boulder to even start to move. Like you're saying in the beginning, those like you're just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And you know, kind of like a restaurant. I don't know what the failure rates on restaurants. That's the one that I always heard. Like, if you want to start a business, don't start a restaurant. Like almost all of them fail. If you want to start a software company, like a procurement tech software company, like any other SaaS business, it probably fits in the same space. Like, I think, I don't know, like 1% of those get to like $10 million of revenue, 1%. So and I think that's an amazing experience to arrive there. I'm like, I can tell you it's amazing, but at the same time, the bodies that are left behind of those other 99, the stories, even the stories of the one that gets to the 10 million, the challenges, the pain, the blood, the sweat, like all of that, it is so much. It's hard. It's hard to describe. And at the same time, we talked earlier about the awesome learning and all this amazing stuff. And I totally agree with all of that. I just think that when you get into this, I think you called me before you started this business, and I know you did. We had a conversation, and I tried to talk you out of it, didn't I? In some form or fashion.
Yes. Well, everyone pretty much who I talked to tried to talk me out of it. But, and unfortunately or fortunately, it's my stubborn nature that when people tell me that I can't do something, then my instant reaction is, oh, I can't do something, watch me. Right. And I think, and right now it's kind of like too late because the baby will be 2 in September. What am I going to do? Like put it up for adoption? Now it's mine. But, I would say that, but there is another truth that, and I think it's, Stan and Alex from Level Path told me that majority of the businesses die before they turn 2 for one simple reason, that the founders do not give businesses enough time and chance to succeed. So if you decided that that's certainly what you want to do, just buckle up knowing that the first 2 years will be super, super tough. But you have to give your business those years, just to give it a chance to become known, for people to get used to the name, to the fact that you exist, be present, be ubiquitous, and deliver good services or whatever is that you do. So it's it's kind of like once you start it makes no sense to stop it in 2 years. But sometimes people, like, if it's a difficult journey and it's not ramping up fast, then it's like, oh my God, I've been in it for a year and a half and nothing happening, or very few positive things happen. I understand why people get very, disappointed, disenchanted, or just fatigue is settling in too.
Well, by the way, congratulations. 2 years is amazing. I'm not
yet.
I love, well, you're there. You're coming, from a marathon perspective, you can see the finish line ahead of you on the 2 years. But I would say, I love Stan and Alex. They're buddies of mine as well. I don't think that just getting to 2 years is the answer to get to 5 or 10 or some big magic thing. I do think that what happens is it's hard. By the way, it doesn't, spoiler alert, year number 3 and 4 are a lot easier than year number 1 and 2. But the determination that you're describing is really important. And when you have this idea that, hey, this is what I want to go do, and you talk to friends, I think friends and family have a tendency not to tell you that you're crazy. And so there's always a lot of people around an idea, an innovation, whatever it might be, to just go, oh, that's amazing, Natasha. You're so smart. That would be it. You're going to it's going to be so wonderful. And because there's no skin in the game. I can make you feel good and I can stroke your ego, all day long. But I think the real test of this is will I give you money? Will I invest in your idea? Like if you have a product idea, everyone's going to tell you it's amazing until they are willing to give you money to invest in it, which is a test. But then secondarily, a customer's actually going to give you money to actually have that good or service and use it. Like the game really changes when it goes from easy compliments to pull out your wallet and write me a check, right? It's a different situation.
Yeah. You always told me hard thing is a hard thing. That it's like there's no way to make hard things easier. But since we're quoting some of the famous founders, Tom Beatty, who was the founder and CEO of ISG. And I'm very happy that Accenture acquired them. Otherwise, they would be Cantor's biggest competitor. I remember having a conversation with him, and he was just sharing his entrepreneurial journey. And he said that it was very hard to get to the first million. Then it was very hard to get to 5 million. And he said from 5 to 10, that's very difficult. Like in services specifically, that you're kind of like getting to certain economy of scale when you can deliver multiple clients, certain scope. But then you have to figure out completely different scale equation if you want to grow the business, like double the revenue. So obviously he had very, very successful company that enjoyed good reputation. And
listen, Natasha, it's been really nice to catch up and reminisce about the enterprise days and about the kind of the startup world.
I actually realized where Zach is. Zach is actually just crying his eyes out because England lost yesterday. Because I was crying my eyes out that England lost, and it was just I was so gutted because again losing to Argentina.
But it's when you've got Messi running around on the other side, it's pretty hard to beat them. It seems like they've had a number of games in this World Cup where they were at risk of like losing the game with just 5-10 minutes to go, and all of a sudden 2 goals come out of nowhere. The guy's just mad. He's just magic.
No. Let me stop you. It's not out of nowhere. Like if you look at stats, and I didn't look at stats, but I was watching very attentively because I was rooting for England. Yes, here I went on a record, even though my Argentinian friends will probably kill me. But just because I felt that they deserve to win. And Henry Kane does not, I love him dearly, and he doesn't have any titles. So I really wants him to win. So I looked very attentively. On 72 minutes when England put a goal in Argentinian territory, Argentinian team did not feel deflated, did not feel that, they were constantly making hits. They were trying and trying and trying and trying and trying. I saw the last 6.5 minutes as a true testimony to leadership that came from Messi, because even though the goals were not his, he's the one who initiated and created this mastery of combinations on the field. It's perseverance, because like even when they hit the gates, it's like, we needed it so much, like from their perspective, but they kept pushing. So, and the teamsmanship that they demonstrated, like not camaraderie, but like beyond camaraderie, true teamsmanship, just like boom, boom, boom. Like they never stopped. They showed no fear, no hesitation, no doubts in their win. That was truly great demonstration of leadership, perseverance, and teamsmanship from my perspective.
Those are great lessons to carry right back into the startup, or back into the boardroom, or back into your CPO role. 100%. Well, Natasha, thank you for
thank you. That was a great idea to discuss.
Yeah, thank you for sharing so much of these ideas. I don't know how many of our listeners out there are thinking about starting their own business, or kind of taking advantage of the learnings that you and I have kind of observed from the outside. There is a lot. I mean, my big encouragement to everybody is keep learning. If there's one metric that you could apply to your life and career as sort of maybe a leading, it would show up from a lagging perspective as well, but a leading indicator of what's to come. It's sort of a measure of the learning and the stress and the the growing that you're feeling. And because if you're not, like, pack your bags, you're not going anywhere. If you're not learning now, you're not going anywhere in the future. I always tell my kids that learning is more valuable than earning. So when you look at your salary and you look at what you're doing, if you're trying to evaluate an offer, an opportunity, a decision to stay in or go out or do any of these things, for sure prioritize the learning of one option versus another. Natasha, I'm very excited about getting back together again with you next week. And Zach, I want to talk about leadership and decision making. There are some really cool, we've had some great conversations about leadership generally, but I've been thinking a lot about what that translates into from a methodology and an algorithm and even a mindfulness around how do you get to the right decision. So it's going to be great to catch up again. Everybody out there, don't forget to like, comment, and share, and we will see you again soon. Thanks again, Natasha.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye.